All right, so we'll go ahead and get started because I want to try to get through stuff so that you guys can practice doing returns on each other tonight, okay? All right. And here I thought I was gonna, now that we have an even number here I thought I was gonna get the chance to have Jean do my tax return and break her in right. Yep, she was practicing, haven't you? Yeah, I know. I wouldn't do that to you, so. All right, but we'll start exercises in chapter 5. As is expected, I should say, that most of them dealt with EIC. The 5A exercise, basically, it was just kind of teaching you how that earned income works. You know, it had you looking them up in the table, you know, based on filing status and qualifying children. Basically, that exercise kind of talks about how it talked about, you know, there's that slope up. You kind of hit a plateau in every different filing status and number of qualifying children, and then it drops off pretty quick. So they basically just wanted you to kind of learn that. And then there obviously was one that was a married filing separate filing status, and that takes that credit right off the table. Okay. So any questions on 5A? And any questions on 5B? 5B was the ones. One second here to get to 5B. Can I go by it? What page is 5B on? I think I'm far enough. Okay, so this was one that talked about the questions basically were asking, will the following taxpayers qualify to claim the EIC credit, right? Yes or no on the credit line. If no, explain why. You know, same thing, is kind of given scenarios. So if somebody asked you a question and called in and said, you know, I have so-and-so situation. Like number 2, Wanda calls in and says, I provide a home for my daughter, 17 all year long. She uses the head of household filing status. This is Wanda. Her AGI is 39,200. Can she claim the credit? And that one's yes, but not much, because she's going to get like $63 because of where it phases out or where it ends. Okay.
I thought the daughter had to be under 17.
That's for the child tax credit. If you think about the ages, we're going to talk about one today. That's the child or dependent care, and that's 13.
Okay.
The child tax credit is 17, under 17, I should say, when they reach 17, they're out. All right. The earned income credit is 19, and it's 24 if they're in school. And then there's really no age limit per se for somebody that's totally and permanently disabled as a qualifying child. So that's kind of the, you know, those are those ages things of the things we've talked about so far. So 13 is dependent or child care. Under 17 is child tax credit, which we talked a little bit about on the refundable. We'll talk a little bit more about it on this one, the additional child tax credit. 19, first threshold on EIC. Second threshold is under 24 and in college. And then the last one is really no age limit, disabled or permanently disabled. Yep. So, okay. If you remember, that's kind of in the EIC worksheet, your little due diligence where they ask you questions. And a lot of times it's right up at the top of the, if you're, you know, on the top of the EIC form there. Okay. Any questions on any of the other ones in 5B? Okay. What's that?
Were there 4 yeses and 4 no's?
There were 2 yeses, 2 and 8. What other ones did you get a yes for, Gene?
4 and 5.
Okay, so 4. Maria Samson, 67. What's the age limit? Right out of the gate, you know, we don't have to read the rest of the question. She's 67 years old. The EIC stops at 65. And what'd you say the other one was?
5.
And 5 is Jack Demick, 24, uses the single filing status. His earned income and AGI were $10,500. All right. Can he claim the credit this year? Same thing. It's kind of a question building off the previous one. You have to be between what ages?
25 and 65.
25 and 65. So he's too young, and the first question was too old. Okay.
So why on 3 can't the grandparents claim grandson?
Larry and Sandy Smith filed jointly on their tax return. Their dependent grandson lived with them all year. Their income was from pension, interest, and Social Security. Yep, that's the words earned income credit. Okay. All right. Okay. And again, I talked about that, with grandparents having grandkids, it's tough. They have to be under 65, and then they have to have earned income. If they've retired early and, they're just drawing Social Security and pension after 62, there's, no credit there.
Did you get a part-time job?
Yeah. But sometimes that part-time job just makes taxes. They don't get to keep the money, but might make a refund for the earned income credit. So it might be a positive. Yeah, it could be. Could definitely be. Okay. All right. And then we had a little eligibility checklist for 5C. And again, that's kind of more so have the due diligence that goes on there. How'd everybody do with Jeffrey and Chloe on the EIC form? Everybody all right there? Again, it's writing the form out in paper, but it's basically the questions between what we do on the main info sheet and what we would do on the EIC to see if they qualify. If you look at those 6 questions that are there, basically they got the name. Then the first thing is, they have to have a Social Security number. They have to be a certain age. Then it talks about 4A talks about was the child under the age of 24 at the end of the 2017. There's that age thing, Kevin, we were talking about. Then it talks about relationship that it has to classify there. And then basically the last question is, did they live with you for more than half the year? Okay. All right. And again, those are all things that we do as part of the due diligence on the different things that we do within the return. Okay. So that one was kind of filling out the forms by hand, seeing where they go and fill in. All right. And what everybody get for their earned income credit for them. So on the, what'd you put on line 42? Anybody get their number there?
2391.
2391, exactly. Okay. So you had to kind of do the little EIC worksheet and kind of look things up. Yeah, it was kind of a fancy way of making you look in the chart, right? Yeah. Especially that EIC worksheet. You got to love the IRS. They give you 10 lines of, chasing your tail and 1 line that really has some meat to it. Yeah. Wait till we get into the one today with the education credits. The form's written part 1, part 2, part 3, but you got to do part 3 before you do part 1 and 2.
Is there another form that you have to do that on too?
What's that?
Is there another one that you
It says
do?
backwards?
Right.
Yeah.
Just that one? That you do?
Oh, there's several.
Yes, I thought.
Yeah,
There was
there's
another
several.
one.
There's several, of course. Yep. Yeah, the American Opportunity Lifetime Learning Credit Worksheet, 8863, it's backwards to me. I don't know why they do it. And it's a good thing our software does it the way it does, where it sends you right to page 2 and part 3 to get all the information in there and do your due diligence with those 4 questions before you even worry about the calculation. So, all right, so let's go through the quiz. We got, see how we do here as a group. And Jean, my star student back there, I'm going to start with you. You get number 1, and I'll explain. I think you'll know why once you read it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did get it.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Taxpayer does not have a qualifying child for EIC, which is true. C.
Okay. Yep, they must be at least 25 and under 65. Okay. All right, Janet, number 2.
Which statement does not meet Rule 14 concerning the earned income credit requirement? Rule 14, the taxpayer must have lived in the U.S. for more than half the year.
Well, which one doesn't really establish, kind of jumps out at you?
Oh, C, the taxpayer lived outside the U.S. on extended military.
Well, remember citizenship, though. Somebody can be a U.S. citizen even if they're living on it, because that area is considered. What's D say?
I thought that's a part of the U.S. The taxpayer lived in Puerto Rico for over half the year.
Yep.
Isn't that part of the U.S.?
No, not for this case. Not for this case. So, all right. Kevin, number 3.
Taxpayer's child must meet 3 tests to be a qualified child for EIC. The statement below is not one of those 3 tests. Must be under 13.
Yep, kind of goes back to that age thing I was talking about. We're going to talk about the 13-year-old thing when we talk about dependent care. All right, Mary Ann, number 4.
Statement is false concerning EIC. A, the taxpayer must have a qualified child.
Yep. Income thresholds are pretty low and the amounts are pretty low, but you don't have to have a child to get EIC. But you have to be at least how old, Gene? There you go, okay? Number 5, I'll take care of. It says, write the 7 rules that everyone must meet in order to get EIC credits. Basically things like your AGI has to, work into the tables. It's on the little chart. Social Security numbers. You cannot file separate. Taxpayer B must be a U.S. citizen or a resident alien all year. No foreign income. Remember we talked about investment income must be $3,400 or less. And investment income is anything, and it can include rental income because that is investment. And the taxpayer must have earned income, thus the name Earned Income Credit. Okay?
How much is the investment income?
3,400.
Oh, 3,400.
Yep, so 3,400 or less. Yep. So if you make $4,000 net profit on your rental, that's considered investment property. You negate yourself from the EIC. A lot of times people don't realize that, and they're living in a double. And one of the ways they make ends meet is renting the other half, makes the payments. So, all right, Gene, number 6.
Which is false about the additional child tax. Put A.
The taxpayer must file a Schedule 8812 with their tax return. So which one's false, though? That's true, because that's what the additional child tax credit is.
I thought you didn't always have to file them.
To get the additional child tax credit, yes. Okay. But the additional child tax credit, what's this chapter about? Which type of credit?
Oh, it's non-refundable.
Yep, yeah. So the additional child tax credit is a non-refundable credit. The child tax credit is non-refundable. The additional child tax credit is refundable.
Oh.
Okay, that's for 17. For 18, it works even stranger because for 17, we're only worried about the $1,000, and it can be broken up in between the two. The one problem I'm going to do, we'll see that. But for 18, the $2,000 is the maximum on the non-refundable, and it's a $1,400 max on the refundable. So not all 2,000 of the credit in 18 can be refundable, like it is in 17, where all 1,000 is. So, okay. All right, let's see. Janet, number 7.
The refundable portion of the American Opportunity Tax Credit is a maximum of 30%.
Actually, a little higher, 40%. 40%. We got $2,500 that we're breaking up there, okay? And 40% or $1,000 can be refundable, okay? Kevin, number 8.
Which is false about the credit for excess social security tax and railroad tax withheld? And C, the credit can be claimed, the overholding occurred by one employer.
Yep. So remember, if it's on the tax return, it means we got 2 or more employers. If it's just one, we can't put it on the tax return. We got to go right straight to the employer. All right, number 9.
Which is false about the credit for tax on undistributed capital gains? A, credit applies to tax.
Yep, and that's about the extent of the number of times you'll ever see the credit for the tax on undistributed capital gains in your lifetime is reading that question, okay? Yeah, it just doesn't happen. So it's one of those things that it doesn't happen, so. All right. Let's see here. I'll do the last one. And which is false about the health coverage tax credit, okay? And again, remember, it's the health coverage tax credit, not the premium tax credit. The premium tax credit has to do with the Affordable Care Act. That's that credit people get to help them pay for their insurance. This one is different, and it's the answer is B, the employer is limited to paying 50% of the premiums, okay? And the reason it's different, like I said, the best way to remember it is it's about displaced workers. If somebody is, when they did the bailout, people got, part of the bailout was that they were going to end up paying for their health insurance, so the government allowed them to take the credit to get some of that back. And the other one is that displaced workers that their jobs were shipped overseas, they get this credit also. Okay. All right. Okay. And I think I gave you guys the answers to, let's see here. Did I give you guys the answers the other night for some of the problems through 4? Did I give you 5 too? No, I just gave you through 4. All right. Any questions on any of the problems? Anybody say I got answers on my problems, or Jim this morning kept saying I got red and I can't get rid of it. So.
Are we talking about the workbook now?
Yeah, workbook. All right. Any questions on any of the problems?
I could make one of the state refund transfers and what I did.
Which one was that?
I was Samson.
Samson?
It's 4 weeks.
Okay. All right. Oops, chapter 5. All right, so we have Samson, and that is on page 47. All right. Okay. All right, looking at it, let's see here. Kick me out. Okay, looking at it, on your Schedule B, okay, I'm just kind of throwing one thing out there. Were you close or were you way off?
Pretty close.
Pretty close, okay. On 4-9, your interest income, your interest on savings bonds. Did you remember to do the state adjustment?
I figured it probably had something to do with it.
Okay, so let me go. Where's my Boyd, guys? Okay, so remember, if I have the instance here on the one with the interest, things go on my Schedule B, but they don't go directly on my B, so I got to do that little worksheet that's buried in there. That's probably a good note for you, Marianne. You're talking about where you find things. But so if I go to my Schedule B and I go into that first little B box and hit F9, I get that interest statement, okay? And in this case, John had First National Bank. And he had $541. It's asking for box 1 or 3. But remember on this one that savings bond interest is not taxable on the state. So when we think it's not taxable, I want you to think negative. So you put a little negative in there, and then we back it out on the 541. Did you remember to do that? All right, Mary Ann's going, nope, didn't remember to do that. Remember that one little chart that's in the middle of chapter 5. Let's see here, and I close chapter 5. Oh, not chapter 5, I'm sorry. Chapter 4. We got to remember this one little chart here. This little guy right here, that's right in the middle of 4.6. That's that one. So if we have savings bonds taxable on the federal, not on the state. Okay? So that's where we do that adjustment. So that no for taxable on the state means no puts a negative. So if I go back to my Schedule B, I got to make sure I put that little negative. I know it's hard to see, especially on the color that I have up there for the screen, but if you make sure that you do negative, all right? So that would be the adjustment in there. And let's see here. And then they had some lottery winnings. You got those in there? He won $421 in the lottery. But it did say that he had, he bought $52 worth of losing lottery tickets. But he does not itemize, so that would not have made a difference. That was kind of a moot point on that one, okay? So what'd you get for your 2 numbers, Gene, on that problem on 4-1?
Balance due was 157,
Mm-hmm.
but the state refund I can only get 22.
Okay, so I guarantee if you do that adjustment, that negative, that's going to be just enough to add that extra to get that state. You should have got $54. Okay,
Because I put that in for that part, now I have 2 on my Schedule B. So I just added it to, I just put it on my Schedule B instead of going into that one.
you always, yep, you always got to go into that
So
worksheet.
now I have 2 of them. How do I do it?
So you have 2 of them, 2 worksheets or 2 entries on your B?
2 entries on my B now. Look at that. And that's when I said I don't know how to get into some of them. I don't remember how to. So see, now I have that 541, but I have this one.
Okay, so you have addition in there. Okay, so go to your worksheet inside.
So go to back to my worksheet.
Yep, you got 2 of them in there.
Ah,
But right there. So that one
has.
yeah,
only-
remove that. So you did do it right, yeah.
Yes, I did have that.
Yep, so hit okay. All right, and then go to the statement on go to the interest statement, the other one you have there. Yep.
And now
All
it's my minus on that.
Oh, but you put the minus here.
Oh, where's it?
Yep, so don't put the negative number, make sure you put it under the plus or minus top.
Oh, it goes there, then there.
Yeah.
And then here,
Just put 541.
541. Now it makes sense.
Okay. Now go back and get rid of your scratch pad.
Get rid of it.
Did you teach her to do scratch pads, Beth? Nope.
Yes, and
Okay.
that threw me off. I'm not supposed to have a scratch.
Nope, don't do the scratch pad. Okay?
But why not?
Because we have a worksheet for it.
We don't have a worksheet, we do our scratch pad?
Yeah, there's other places I'll teach you to use the scratch pad.
Okay.
But as far as this one, stay away from the scratch pads for right now. Okay?
So what are our figures supposed to be then, balance due?
Balance due on the federal should have been, what did I say, 157 and a $54 refund.
For the state?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got the 157, but not the state one.
Okay. Go to your 1040.
Okay. Which
And
page?
Page 1.
I need the 157.
So everything looks good there. Go to your W-2 for me. or Yum Yum. Okay. And scroll down to the bottom. Keep going. There you go. Remember I said out of sight, out of mind a lot of times? Yeah, I always emphasize that with the W-2s. Both when you see the paper W-2, the state withholding kind of hides at the bottom. And then when you're up on the screen on a W-2, you know, when you're way off on the state, that would be the first place I go. Okay. So if I have a W-2 here, and I pop it open on the screen, and I start getting going here and go, okay, there's my numbers. Well, right now I've kind of stopped and all the stuff I can see, but hiding down there at the bottom is box 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And, you know, even if it's red, it's kind of out of sight too. Okay, so always make sure we go down there and check that.
So
Right.
54 is the state refund?
Yep. Yep. All right, what about any of the other problems? How'd we do on that? Well, we talked about, how about chapter 5? How'd you guys do on chapter 5.3? The days. Okay. One thing I want to show you on that one is, because we had some questions about it this morning, is I went through 5.
Sara Day?
Sara Day. Okay. On Sara Day, her federal refund was $4,967. So we are on. And the-
4,967?
So what'd you get? Okay. So for 514 is in the book. Okay. The state refund is 1769.
That's 1637.
Okay. All right. So we'll go through that. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about on the state. So if you have your workbook, open it up to page 514. And there's a couple bullet points that I'm going to talk about here. All right. So we got class problem 5.3, Sara Day. And we're going to go through the 1040. Since she filed a 1040A, so what's that tell us about her box in the middle of 1040 page 1? Did she itemize last year? No. Okay. It does make a statement there that talks about her W-2 has the old address on it. It really doesn't. It has her new address on it. But what I did do is, if you look up there, I did this where I checked the third box down on her W-2 and I put in 123 Main Street. Okay. Still lived in Lancaster. So if somebody has, you have to recreate, when you do the W-2s, make sure you recreate it accurate to what's on the paper in front of you.
Also, we can't do the 75 Holland?
Well, I just made this one up. Actually, it shows 75 Holland. Okay. But if the address was different, say that she lived, her W-2 showed 123 Main Street, then I'd have to change it on the W-2. It does not change her information on the tax return. So it'll still have her current address as far as the tax return itself, but you have to put the correct address so it matches what's on the W-2. So make sure that you match the W-2. So if the W-2 that you had sitting in front of you said 123 Main Street, but you knew her address was 75 Holland Avenue, what I would say to my client is, I'm going to have to correct your W-2 here in the system and put your old address on it. Make sure you tell your employer that they need to change your address, because, you know, it could be the case that something can be mailed out for her, but they'd have her old address and it would never get to her. Okay. All right. Always make sure that they're aware of that. The other thing is, the second bullet point down there says the rent for her old apartment was $430 per month for all of 2017. Sara wants to know if she qualifies for the renter's credit. Okay. The renter's credit is a little credit that shows up if you go to the New York 201 page 4. And And so New York, page 201, page 4, you have your little line 67 says real property tax credit. What that means is somebody that rents from somebody else, and if their income is low and the rent is a certain level, they get a credit because they're helping their landlord pay property tax. Just like the landlord gets a credit on their tax return or deduction, they get it too, okay? So if you go over to the right and we light that up and hit F9, it's going to give us this form called a New York 214. And in there we have a bunch of questions to answer. And let's see.
Which line did you go on?
Hold on one second here. I'm going to get all my information out. Okay. So if I go to my New York 201, IT 201, that's the tax return itself, page 4. I go to line 67, and I go over and I light my box up, and I hit F9. Inside there should be the option of a New York 214, the real property tax credit. And that's the form we're going to pick. And at the top it says claim for real property tax credit for homeowners and renters. That's why the renter credit thing comes in there. All right. Has some questions, and the first one it's asking us for, did you occupy the same residence for at least 6 months? That's why they made that little sentence in there. It says that Sarah and her daughter moved in January, so we say yes. Okay. Did you own real property with a market value of $85,000 or more? Well, if she's renting, she probably does not, so we're going to say no. Okay. Is it public housing? No. And it's not a nursing home. All right. So we've kind of met to determine our eligibility. It sounds like she might be eligible. So now we're going to go to the New York 214, page 2. And there's a little section that says renters only, part 4. Okay. What was her rent?
5,100.
Yep. Okay. So what we do, and the way to get that, if you light up the box, I hit F5. Has anybody discovered this yet? And I hit F5. What is her monthly rent?
4,000.
Okay. And then I can use my little calculator or my little 10 key, whatever, and hit times 12. And then if I hit enter, it puts the number right in there for me. Okay. Instead of going, where's my calculator, or everybody pulling out their phone to do the math, there's a little calculator in there. And trust me, when you get in, when we do Schedule Ds with stocks, you're going to love the F5. Okay. All right. And then down on 21, we have to answer the question. She lived there 12 months, correct? And we also answered the question on line 20. It didn't say about her paying any of the, she got all of the, 100%. So, okay. It didn't include any of the heat or anything like that. Just talked about her rent. Okay. All right. So on that one, that adds an extra, what did I determine from the answer key? It added an extra $49. So if we go back to the page 4, we can see that it got an extra $49 for her. Okay. All right. Now, you said you were off on the federal refund. You were good, right? Marianne, you said you had the 49.67?
I noticed that my earned income, on line 65 was 975. I think you have 965.
Mm-hmm.
What's your state refund again?
1769. And where are you at?
1637.
Okay. So let's go back to your, let's go to page 2. Okay. Of your, the New York IT 201, page 2. Yep, it's everything the same there. Okay. Did we get the little subtraction out of 20 on line 28?
Correct.
Okay,
Do we have to put that in, how many would come in from the federal?
well, what did we just do on the last problem? Because this is interest income from bonds. Remember how we,
Subtract it out on the one.
yep. So in order for it to carry over here, we got to do that worksheet inside the Schedule B, what we just did on the last one. Did you do a scratch pad again?
No, I did not.
Okay, so if we go to our Schedule B, we go in there and we do that worksheet.
So I highlight that and do F9 again.
What are you on?
I'm on Schedule B.
Okay, and you're in the miniature box B?
I'm in the miniature box B of where
Yep.
it has $100.
Yep, okay, so hit F9, and did that take you to your worksheet?
It's a new.
Well, you don't need a new one, you should have one that you already have the 100 in. Or did you put the 100 right on the Schedule B?
I put it right on.
Okay, so delete it off the Schedule B, so go back to your B and get rid of it. Now go in and hit F9 and get that new interest worksheet you were talking about.
New interest statement.
Mm-hmm. And that little worksheet she had First National Bank.
And it'd be the 100 on that one.
Yep, and then you got to go over to that column for the state adjustment.
And the plus on that. Now
Negative.
That's gonna be a negative, so
Yep,
the 100.
yep, because it's $100 taxable on the federal. The negative is making it non-taxable on the state. Okay, now go back to your your New York 201, page 2. And see if there is on line 28, okay?
28.
Yep, so we got that, okay? And let's go to page 3. I'm going to talk about this one for just a second. Did you have taxable income 1369? On line 38?
On 38, let's see, which number are we on, which page?
IT 201, page 3.
Page 3. Okay, 38 is 4,569. I have other figures on mine, page 2. So maybe that's what, I may have added
Okay.
this one.
Get
I
you
don't
back
remember
up
anything
there.
though. You had that?
Go back up.
Okay, no.
That's good. Okay, so go back down. Standard deduction. Exemption.
I remember putting that in.
Okay, what are your main info for me? Just a little bit. Okay, here we go. Does she have a qualifying child? Sarah has Melinda, right?
Melinda.
Okay, so if she is single with a qualifying child,
That's what it was. I couldn't change this. I wanted to change the head of household.
Hmm.
And I couldn't do it. That's why I
just check in the head of household, just be able to check the box. And hit enter.
Okay. Oh, I did it this time.
Yeah.
Before it came out of the box and said I can't change something or.
Yep, nope, you're in there. So yeah, so that's
That's
the
what I
filing
had to ask
status.
you.
Yep,
Okay,
yep, so the filing status made the difference on that.
right, I couldn't
Okay.
physically do this.
Because then her standard deduction on the state was much higher.
Yep.
The one thing I want to point out on this is line 40, New York State household credit, okay? That is for families that have lower income. As I tell my clients that qualify, I say that is the governor saying thank you for living and breathing in the state of New York, okay? He's giving you $75, all right? Okay. All right. Yep, that's what that household. So what it did on this instance, you calculate her tax bill. It's kind of like the Pac-Man credits on the federal, okay? It wiped out her tax, all right? It's not a refundable credit. It's a non-refundable credit. So, but it basically wiped out her tax bill, all right? The other thing I want to point out too is 41 and 42. Remember I used an example one time about the W-2s having, or the main info, the W-2s having people from multiples or on multiple states, like he worked in Pennsylvania. At the bottom of the W-2 says PA, okay? These are ones that All right. If I go in there and hit F9, okay, there's a couple different forms in there. One is a New York resident credit and the New York credit for taxes paid to Canada, okay? So if I'm in the resident credit one, you can see the top there, I can do this little worksheet, all right? I have to do this for my son every year. He works, he's a resident of New York because he's on my taxes as a college student, but he works where he goes to school in Ohio, and I can get credit for what is unbelievable amount of local taxes that he pays in the Cleveland area. All right, you think taxes are bad in New York, should see some of the local taxes in Ohio, even for somebody that's making hardly any money, okay? But that's where that one would come into play too, all right? And then a little consideration here on the New York is that we have all of these credits are refundable. Child tax credit, obviously we know the earned income credit, the real property tax credit. A lot of these other ones we won't do. We're going to talk a little bit about the college tuition credit. They're all refundable. So even though I had nothing up here, I get all this back. So in this case, she got $1,769, okay? So basically, she had adjusted gross income of $13,000, and she's getting about what, 60, let's see, what, 67, almost $7,000, okay? Because of the credit she has for different things. All right. Okay, any other questions on any of the other problems in there? I'm trying to think what else. The big one coming away, we'll do more practice today on the college ones, but the big one I want you to come away with is like the one for the Harmons on 5.1, or page 5.6, I should say, problem 5.1. If you look at page 5.8, that one has a 1099 INT that has things in box 1 and 3, okay? My suggestion to you, to keep it straight for yourself, I would do Bank of America and then just do box 1. And then I would do B of A. I usually do them like this. So if I had this, if you look up at the board there, I'll do them like this. I'll do Bank of America. And I would say 71. And then I'm going to do B of A, and I'm going to write bonds, okay? Because I know it's a box 3. Soon as I do that, what am I going to do? I'm going to go over and make that state adjustment, okay? A lot of times people add those two together, and then they got to remember which amount to back out. I'd much rather have you do it separate. It's a great thing, too, if you have a returning client and you get their interest, and you say, okay, you didn't cash any bonds this year? Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, then I'll just leave it blank. And so
right there, you had to hit F9 or just the negative?
negative, yep, negative. And then I know that my bond was 278, so I'm backing it out of the state. So it's clean for me, okay? All right. Take that one back out of there, okay? All right, and we'll talk a little bit more about college. We did the Van Ettens, Eatons, what did we decide? Etten we decided? So, okay. All right. And just for your notes, if you want to write in your workbook, or you can write on your syllabus, you know, those pages, the recording your refunds at the end. Are we ready? I'm going to give you the answers for 5. I'm going to give you the answers, Gene, at your syllabus. There's those ones in the back where you have all the names, or some people will write it right in the note section of your workbook. I'm going to give you the answers for 5, chapter 5. So the first one, if you're in the workbook, you can write this in your notes on the bottom of 5.6 in the workbook. Or if you have the syllabus, you can write it in there.
Oh, so you're gonna get this for like Herman and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'll let you copy down because I gave them this morning to the morning class. Okay. All right. So we got 5.1 for Harmon's. The federal refund is 2604. and the state is $3. Okay, so that was 5-1 Harmon.
Refund?
What's that?
State is a refund,
Of $3, yep. You might want to frame that check from the governor, all of $3, put it on the wall, signed by the governor. 5-2, Van Etten's we had done. Federal on that one is 1783, and the state is 2141. So federal 1783, state 2141. All right. And then the days, the one that I just talked about, the day one, the federal is 4967. Okay. And the state is 1769. All right. 1769 on that one. So those are the 3 problems for chapter 5. All right. Okay. All right, so everybody good on those? All right. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's, before we hit chapter 6, let's take 5 minutes. And I'm going to give the answers here, and if anybody wants to pass these around, okay? Okay. All right, so we are going to start chapter 6. All right, and chapter 6 is our non-refundable credits, okay? So we've done the refundable. We talked about those. Those are Energizer bunnies. They keep going on and on and on and on, okay? And where did I go? Hold on one second here. I disappeared. There we go. Okay. So we're going to do our refundable credits. All right. So chapter 6. Today we're just going to talk about the foreign tax credit, the child and dependent care credit, and then the 2 college credits, the American Opportunity and the Lifetime Learning. All right. There on page 6.3, we have our little objectives that we always talk about. Identify and claim the foreign tax credit. 90% of what you guys are going to do with the foreign tax credit is basically going to be like those things I showed you on that investment thing. They're going to have foreign tax because of some of their mutual fund or investments or whatever. Very rarely will you see any. I see a lot more now for some reason. I got a bunch of people coming over from the school that are foreign students that are just here on a student visa, and sometimes I have their foreign tax credit, things like that. But most of them you're just going to see as just as a simple one, and we'll talk about where those go, okay? We're going to talk about the test and computing the child and dependent care, the American Opportunity, and the Lifetime Learning Credit. All of these credits really start out and you think, boy, this sounds like a great credit, because if anybody's realized, you basically pay for your kids for college twice. You pay for them when they're in preschool because of what it costs for daycare, and then you got on the other end of their life cycle after high school, you pay their tuition again. Because some of these preschools, I can't believe what some of these people come in paying. So, all right. But we're going to talk about that. And it's not, these credits are not dollar for dollar. Just because you're paying $45,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is to go to Canisius College, doesn't mean you get to take $50,000 off your tax return. Would be nice. It's going to be just a portion of it, and that has to do with a couple things. Same thing with the child and dependent care. You know, just because you're paying $10,000 a year for somebody to watch your kid while you work, doesn't mean you get to take that $10,000 off. There are a couple options that make it better than others, but most of the time we don't, okay? These refundable credits, it talks about on top of 6.4, that shows the lines that they're on. So if we think about our 1040 page 2, there's a whole little section for 2017. And as I said, for 2018, there's my 2018. Here you go. All right. We have there's your postcard. Okay. So that is Schedule 3, non-refundable credits. It has its own postcard, and it's what? Less than a quarter of the page? Okay, rather than being on the 1040 like we see it now. All right, so if somebody has that, and there must be some other credit that's coming down the pipeline because it has a reserved line. Okay, always got to love the reserved line. All right, foreign tax credit. Really all I want you to kind of understand from this one is that if they have investment foreign tax credit, that you can put it in 2 spots, okay? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go into my friends, the Boyds. All right, and on the, okay, on the 1040 page 2, again, we're talking about these lines here. Like I said, you know, this is how you get postcards, I guess. Non-refundable credits. We're going to be talking about this section. We're basically doing first 3 lines, okay? Foreign tax credit, you can use that form, which is 4 pages. I know Jean loves forms, so this one's 4 pages for you. But she likes the next one, if required, okay? If it's just foreign tax paid in an investment account, this is a green number, so we can enter it right straight on there. Okay? All right. And the reason we can do that is if we do go into the form, okay, we do go into the form. So if I go in there and hit F9 and I bring up this form, like I said, it's 4 pages. All right. And you have to, so Gene, what you got to do is you got to decide if it's passive, if it's general. No, I'm just kidding. Gene's going, I'm not doing that. You got to decide what countries and have the country codes. No. You're going to do the simplified. Do you like simplified, Gene?
Probably not.
Probably not? Okay. You're going to do the simplified. So basically, if they have foreign tax credit below $600, which in investment accounts is most of the time, you just enter it there. So you can do it 2 spots. It's just a single entry. Okay? You don't have to fill out the 4 pages of forms. Okay? And even more fun, you got alternative minimum tax there too. But you just fill it out there. Okay? If they are a person that maybe is a U.S. citizen, and part of their job, they go across to Canada and work, and they pay taxes over there, then you might have to do that foreign tax credit, because basically this is kind of like I talked about with the state of New York for other states. For the federal for other countries, if you pay tax there, you get a credit. And that's the way you do that. Okay? All right? So taxes you paid. And again, it's a non-refundable credit. So just because you work in Canada, paid $5,000 in taxes there, and you might get a credit for it, doesn't mean that you get all $5,000. Because if you only have a $2,500 tax bill, you're not getting all $5,000, because it'll stop. All right? That's where that comes in. Okay? So that's basically our foreign tax credit. Okay? All right, so we're going to go down past that. And child and dependent care. So we're on page 6.6. And I stress the words child and dependent. Okay? It doesn't say child or dependent. It says child and dependent. Okay? All right. So seeing that that Pat is here with us, I'm going to make him fair game. Okay? So in order for Mary Ann to come to class in the morning, she has to take Pat, her spouse, to an adult daycare place, okay? Because he can't be on his own. So that's why he's here tonight, all right? So if she has that case, then she may be able to get a credit for what she pays to have Pat taken care of while she's in class, okay? All right? So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, you know, we talked about, Kevin, that under 13, okay? You know, but as it says, or for a spouse or dependent who is not able to take care of himself or herself. All right? So that's where that can come into play. The credit can be up to 35% of those expenses. Okay? So again, you're paying $10,000. What's the first thing that's going to happen? I'm down to $3,500. All right? And then we'll see that there's actually some other things that are the starting point. But it's also dependent on adjusted gross income. Okay. The other thing too is if the taxpayer received dependent care benefits during the year, the amount of the credit may be reduced. And what I mean by that, remember we saw in that box 10 on the W-2, it said dependent care. So if I am contributing to, or my employer is giving me benefits to pay for my child care, that may be part of my income or taxable, reducing my taxable income. All right. Or as it talks about here, sometimes they have things and everybody thinks of the flexible spending account is strictly has to do with medical. Sometimes those flexible spending accounts can be set up that you can set aside pre-tax dollars to pay for child care. All right. And in that case, again, and the way to think about it is if we're going to get that lower taxable income and a credit, sounds like a double dip. All right. And we don't want to be able to do that. And again, when we do one of the problems, you'll kind of see this a little bit more. All right. 2441 is the form that we're going to use. All right. Okay. At the bottom of 6.6, it talks about the test to claim the credit. And again, the care must be for one or more qualifying persons. Doesn't just say child, it says persons. The taxpayer or spouse of filing joint must have earned income for the year. Okay. Expenses covered must be paid so the taxpayer can work or look for work. Okay. Again, in the case of Pat and Mary Ann's here looking for work and she needs somebody to take care of Pat. Okay. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to pick on you, Pat. All right. Just okay. All right. There is a deduction for long-term care contracts if you have long-term care insurance. So we'll talk about that. It's a great one on the state side. Okay, so we talk about that. Payments must be made to someone the taxpayer cannot claim as a dependent. If the payments were to a taxpayer or its child, they must also be 19 or older by the end of the year. All right, so the payments cannot be to a spouse or the parent of qualifying person if the person's child taxpayer is under age 13. So you cannot claim having pay your 19-year-old daughter to babysit your 12-year-old. Okay? All right. Now, basically what I'm saying about this with the someone that cannot claim as a dependent, the best example of this, a lot of times people will come in and say, well, I live with my sister and I pay her to watch my kids while I work. Okay, great. Is she going to claim it as income? Because if I have a situation like that, I'm basically on that situation where I have two sides of the equation. If I'm going to claim it as a credit, somebody's got to do what? Claim it as income. So the IRS is going to say, okay, great. And we'll see on the 2441, you're going to put that person's name in there, and my sister, my sister Debbie, I put her in there. I'm going to have to put her social security number on the form. And what's that going to trigger for her? The IRS going, hey, somebody says that you're getting paid $10,000 in, basically without any withholding. You owe us self-employment tax plus income tax on that. So they're going to report them, okay? All right. Number 7 there on the top of 6.7 talks about it. The dollar limit for the amount of qualifying expenses is a maximum of, you can claim 3,000 if it's one, or 6,000 if two or more. So if I'm claiming one child for daycare, I can only claim 3,000 of the expenses. That's where my starting point is. If I have two or more, I have 6,000 that I can claim. All right. Okay.
But wasn't one of the examples, if you had two or more, you could claim more than 3,000 for one? You would split up that 6,000 and you wanted between the two?
Yes. Yeah, because if you have two, you know, it doesn't necessarily, but they can't total more than 6,000. So, okay. We have some little tests there. The qualifying person test, the earned income test, the work related, again, you know, it can't be, you know, whatever that may be. Payments to relatives or dependents, and the filing status of the joint return, okay? On the top of 6.8, there's probably our first real thing with a wonderful little flow chart, okay? You gotta love those. Can you claim the credit? I know starting out for me, these things were invaluable. I loved them, okay? But I'm also different, but that's okay. The thing about them is it was a great way for me to develop my interviewing skills. Because if I'm sitting with somebody and I kind of have a feel for the way these flow charts work, it was kind of my little way to say, okay, you know, I got to ask these questions, and it helps me because if they say no and I say, well, we can't take that credit. Because it may be the case that on this flow chart, I can get to that point. But they're great questions to kind of learn what question to ask if somebody can claim a credit or a non-refundable or refundable credit. So I love the flow charts. So, okay. On the top of 6.9, the test number 6 says the provider identification test. So the person, the taxpayer, must identify all care providers, including name, address, and taxpayer ID. All right? Okay. So if we have an EIN or Social Security number for an individual, we have to put that in there. If it is a church or school, oddly enough, if you count the number of letters in tax exempt, it matches right up with the EIN numbers. Okay, so it fits right in the space. I think that's just, they got lucky on that one. Okay. The next thing is due diligence is required. Okay. So if somebody fails to give you their Social Security number because they say, I don't want to give it to you because of privacy, I'm worried about identity theft. All right. Okay. So you might have to write, and I'll show you when we do the example on the 2441, you might have to write in there, see page 2. And at the bottom of page 2 is going to be this little place where you described. And if it says the lady next door, that's fine. But trust me, they're going to call and say, you need to give us the name, phone number, contact information for the lady next door. Because what are they going to want her to do? Claim it as income, okay? All right. Or there's a little form, a W-10, where you can basically request the information. In the middle there, on page 6.9, talks about work-related expenses. They must be for the well-being and protection, okay? So again, we're taking care of Pat for his well-being and his protection, all right? It cannot be for their food, lodging, clothing, education, and entertainment. So preschool qualifies because it's for their well-being because of their age. So does before and after school. The Y does a lot of programs for the schools. Schools get out at 2:30, 3 o'clock, whatever. Parents work till 5. They go to this Y program. Okay, so that's for their safety. All right, summer school and tutoring programs do not qualify. Neither does gymnastics, ballet, soccer, okay? All right. And you know, you can try to talk somebody till you're blue in the face and say, well, I have enrolled a soccer program so I can work. Okay. Doesn't work because that's for their entertainment. All right. It does not need to be the least expensive option. Okay. And care can be provided outside the home as long as the qualified person spends 8 hours each day in the home. Okay. All right. Dollar limit, we talked about that. Okay. And then there's a few exercises that we'll have. Anybody try the exercises? Kevin, did you have a question on one of them? You were saying something about the exercises?
I just said one of the exercises where they split up the cost.
Oh, okay. Yep, the 6,000. Yep. Okay. At the top of page 611 has a little thing about the expenses paid. Remember, we're on a cash basis, so only expenses paid in 2017 qualify. So if there were expenses paid in 2016 for 17, they can be claimed in 17. I'll show you that on page 2 of the form. There's a little carry forward thing, okay? So we'll talk about that. It talks about expenses reimbursed. If somebody is on social assistance and they get money, which does happen in New York, they get money for childcare, they cannot claim that as money out of pocket, especially if it's non-taxable money. All right, so they can't put it on there. It says, yeah, I have childcare. What do you pay? I pay $5,000. And do you have a receipt? Well, no, the state pays it for me. Well, then you're not paying it, okay? All right. Okay. And again, some of this other part we'll see when we get into the form. On the page 612, there in the middle is a little chart, says if your adjusted gross income is, but not over, then the percentage is. Well, remember we said it can be up to 35%, but that's if your income is 15,000 or less. So if you got your income over 43,000, you're not going to get more than 20%. Okay, and again, when we see the 2441 in action, we'll see how this works. Because if you look on page 612, we got George Smith and his child care. Okay. All right. And on his child care there, if you look at the form, he's got Little Red Riding Hood, and he paid $3,900. Okay. But how much can he really claim out of pocket? Why?
Employer paid the other $1,000.
Yeah, the employer paid the other $1,000. Okay. That being said, what is the maximum for one child? 3,000. But we reduced it. Why? Because of the 1,000 from the employer. Okay. So then we go in here and we got his 24,000. Did I get far enough down? Yep. It's in my range, 30%. Okay, so I got 30% of my 2,000 that they limited us on. Okay. And come down here, what's 30% of 2,000? $600. Okay. Why did I only get $343 though? Because based on my tax bill for my income is only $343. What kind of credit is the child credit? So it only does what? Pac-Man, it only goes to 0. So this is my only non-refundable credit, and my tax bill is $343. That's all I'm going to get. So this number actually comes over from your 1040. Okay? So that's where that number came in. So that's where that 343 came into play. Because you're probably looking at it and going, how did they get that number? Okay? And that's where that number comes into play. All right? All right. So we have that. Show the back of the 2441. So like I said, if you look on page 615, you can see where that expense carries over to line 49. Okay? Okay. Employment taxes for household employers. This is one that's starting to come up more and more because there's a lot of times that people, as an alternative to putting somebody, what was that place that you were going to go to, Pat? Assisted living. What's that? Adult daycare. Okay, but the assisted living, As an alternative, they might hire somebody to be a, household employee. You have to pay tax on that when you pay somebody. You have to pay
Unless you use an agency.
unless you use an agency, and they'll probably pay it. Yep.
They're paying it, you're just paying them.
Yep. But if you have hire somebody, they're basically self-employed for you. Yep. Schedule H. Exactly. Yep.
So if
Okay.
that's the case, and if I'm paying an agency,
Mhm.
I still get the deductible, if I'm paying an agency.
Well, then it might be deductible on your medical expenses. Okay, because there are instances where it could be that way. Because I've had some people that, because of situations that you can put that on that for home care, and they're providing medical support, for them basically. But if it's somebody that they're telling them, this is your schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 3, what's that sound like?
W-2.
Well, it sounds like an employee, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, and then like Janet said, Schedule H, okay? If you look here, okay, actually we talked about this morning, and where did it go? There we go, okay. Schedule H, household employment taxes, all right? So basically what this is, okay, is the Schedule H. If you look at Part 1, looks a lot like the quarterly employment taxes somebody would pay if they have employees. All right? Because you're looking at Social Security, you're looking at Medicare, all right? The additional Medicare tax, things like that. If you think about it though, paying somebody living at home probably may be less expensive than what you would pay for assisted living. And that's why you probably see the spring up of these like Freedom Care for people that are low income. Because I guarantee if somebody's on Medicaid, it's a lot cheaper to pay somebody, and these people can make up to about $45,000 a year staying home taking care of mom or dad. $45,000 a year is a lot cheaper than what it would cost to put them in assisted living. Because assisted living is probably about $45,000 a month. All right.
4,500.
What?
4,500 a month. not 45,000.
45,000 is probably a lot cheaper than them being in assisted living when I see some of these assisted living places. So, nursing home, I guess, would be the better term for them, where they have medical care.
Yeah, if you're an assisted, what they consider assisted living, then you probably just have somebody looking out for them and feeding their meals, and then that's not as expensive as a nursing home.
But the nursing home ones, the Freedom Care, that's the alternative, it's probably a lot cheaper to hire a family member. And the 45,000 is up to if they work 60 hours a week. If somebody only needs 20 hours a week, it's a lot less, obviously. 60 hours are getting some overtime. Because I think they can make up to $19 overtime is what they'll pay them. $19 an hour overtime. So, turns out to be a pretty good job. So, it's not in there. Yeah, we just kind of talked about it, okay? There's an exercise in there that you'll have to fill out the 2441, okay? All right, education credits. We're on page 620. These are a lot of fun, okay? Distinguishing which is which. And as I said, I think they made the form backwards because it seems like you have to do page 2, part 3 before you have anything to do with part 1 or part 2, okay? But the biggest thing that I want you to pay attention is these two on the bottom of 620 is the 2 columns here because we're comparing our education credits, okay? We got the American Opportunity in the first column, the lifetime learning. My maximum credit, $2,500, $2,000 for my lifetime learning. If we looked at next line, the limit, that's our phase out. We've talked about phase out before. The phase out of the American Opportunity is at $180,000 if married filing joint and $90,000 single. If you look at the lifetime learning, it phases out at $132,000 and $66,000. Okay. Refundable or non-refundable. Remember, we talked about the American Opportunity already, that 40%, okay, or better known as $1,000 can be refundable. Lifetime learning, strictly non-refundable, okay. Number of years of post-secondary, We talked about 4 years only for the American Opportunity. That's where hitting that F7 and putting that in the diary is perfect. Available for all years of post-secondary education. All right. So if Kevin decides that he's going to go back to school, but he only wants to take 1 class a semester, and he's in school for 10 years, he can get the lifetime learning every single one of those 10 years.
Up to 15,000 only though. Or did it go up?
Well, the other thing for lifetime learning is that credits is maxed out at 2,000. So again, when we see the form in action, we'll be able to see that. Okay. All right. The type of program required. You know, the American Opportunity student must be pursuing a program leading to a degree. All right. And the lifetime learning does not need to be pursuing a program leading to a degree or other recognized educational credential. So if Kevin starts out at NCCC and takes a photography class, the next semester he decides to take a law enforcement class. All right. So those might be things that he would do there. All right. Number of courses. You have to be enrolled basically for the American Opportunity. Again, 1 or more courses. If you're just taking 1 class, you're fine. All right. As I told the story about my young little friend and the felony drug conviction, American Opportunity, if you have that possession or distribution of a controlled substance. For the lifetime learning, doesn't matter. Okay. So you can go back and forth to Canada as many times as you want. All right. And you're still going to get the lifetime learning. Qualified expenses, tuition, required enrollment fees, and course materials that the student needs for course of study, whether or not the materials are bought at the educational institution as a condition of enrollment or attendance. Basically what that boils down to, if I am going to school to be a cartoonist, then there's chances are my pencils, maybe some paint, paper, special scratch pads, those are my area of study. Some schools now, what do they require the kids to come in with? A tablet or a laptop. Okay, I get that with some, and a condition of their enrollment is that they buy a certain tablet, like an Apple or whatever. Some schools require that. Okay, so that would be something that you could basically on that. Payments for academic periods. Payments made in 2017 for academic periods beginning in 2017 or beginning in the first 3 months of 18. The reason for that, what happens on colleges? So my daughter started at Brockport. She started in the fall of 18, and she first year will go through basically May, give or take, of 19. All right? When is that spring semester typically billed? Before the end of the year, isn't it? Okay, so it's almost like 18, she's paying for a whole year of college. So that's her first year. All right, so that's where it's talking about following the dollar. Now, what happens on the last year, though? If they graduate in May, when has that tuition been paid for? The year before, okay? That's why it's so important that you understand the first 4 years, because you may ask them, are they an undergraduate? That's where you don't want to give them 5 years of that credit, because they will get a letter. And chances are it's going to cost them $1,000 because you got to take it out of the refundable portion and only give them the lifetime learning in that 5th year. Because if they are in a 5-year program, I don't care if it's a 5-year bachelor's program for education, or like I said, in the case of my son, you know, he's getting that extra, but to be a full-time student, he's got golf, frisbee, and I found out he's also doing racquetball. Okay. Yep. I told him, I says, we can't write off the racket and the racquetball as qualified education expenses because it's not for his area of study. But so yeah, that was the 3rd class is racquetball, and apparently he's very much out of shape. So he's at John Carroll, and that's as he says, I'm at a Jesuit school and I'm in this thing with the teachers, one of the brothers from the Jesuit school. He goes, I think he was messing with me because he had me running all over the court and he never moved. So yeah, obviously the brother knew how to play the game, and he had my son running to every corner of the racquetball court. So I wish I would have had a video of that one. So, we talk about they need the tax ID numbers. Actually, lucky enough, guess what? I have for you. I have EIN number for colleges that we typically see. And I have daycare center EIN numbers. Okay. So a little thing of resource for you. All right. Okay. All right. So if Mary Ann decides to put Patrick into Doodlebugs, she's got the EIN number to be able to claim the expenses. Okay.
So you don't have to have it on their letterhead. You can just tell them.
Yeah, you know, most of the time for the child care expenses, you want to get a receipt from them just for the audit purposes. And most of the places that are listed here and most of the places that provide child care in this area, they know. And they probably have them in their little mailbox or little locker or whatever they have at the child care for the child, ready to go for tax season. Because they probably get tired of getting the phone calls. All right.
For the lifetime learning credit, you don't need that, because it's not in those boxes?
You do need it.
You do?
Mhm.
They just didn't
Yep, you'll still need it. Okay. So that talks about the lifetime learning. A lot of these sections talk about the calculations. One thing I want to point out is on the middle of 622, it says expenses paid by others. All right. I'll say something nice about Pat this time. He is so generous, and he's your grandfather, aren't you, Pat? Okay. So he's got a grandchild that he just thinks the world of that's going to college, and he pays the tuition. All right. Seeing that he paid the tuition and he really thinks a lot of my son, he paid the tuition for my son. Okay. That would be somebody other than somebody on my tax return paying the, you know, the tuition. The credit, who does it follow? Does it follow Pat, who paid the tuition, or does it follow the student, which is my dependent? If we read that, who's it follow?
Yeah.
The student.
The student. Yep. So I get the credit even though Pat paid the tuition. All right.
Student, but you're taking the student, so you actually.
Exactly. That's what I mean. It follows the student. So if the student is a dependent on my return and grandma or grandpa pay it, all right, we get the credit, even though they
Give
paid it.
to you, basically.
Yeah, give or take, yes. So, okay. Talks a little bit about the phase out there, okay. You cannot double dip. Talks about in there that you can only claim either the American Opportunity or the Lifetime Learning. You can't do both, but you could. No, you can't. You can't, so, all right. Okay, so we have those.
We're doing both if you get two different students.
Yes, if you had two different students. All right. And chances are, even if they, in the spring semester, they had some out-of-pocket expenses and they were still undergraduate, graduated in May and started grad school in the fall, you could still take the American Opportunity if it's in the first 4 years, because sometimes they'll graduate in 3 and start graduate school in the 4th. So, but you got to make sure you're careful on that one, because sometimes the IRS will get you a letter on that one. Okay.
Yeah, they make sure that it's not checked on that
Little box.
college, it says graduate student.
Yeah, we get those, and then you have to go basically back to the school and get a tuition statement that shows that the spring they were undergraduate and the fall they were graduate, because the school's only going to send one 1098-T and probably check that box. So, and I'll ask my clients, was any of this undergraduate or did they do all graduate school in the year? You know, yes, we're going to get a letter and we're going to have to prove it, but at least we're getting the full credit for them. So, and especially if it's a refundable 2,500. So, you cannot claim things that you got as tax-free dollars. So scholarships and Pell Grants and things like that. So we're on the top of 624 there. But in the middle, we can take student loans because that is my money. So if I was given a student loan to pay for my tuition, that counts as money paid because I received that and paid it to the school. Now, granted, I'm going to be paying it back at a later date, but still, I can take the borrowed funds, okay? All right. Eligible educational institutions, do your due diligence here. I gave you a list with all the different things on it as far as EIN numbers. And let's see if it made the list here. If you look down there, the New York State Institute of Massage is on there. Okay. All right.
Before, my daughter went there.
Yep. Okay. And I'm not seeing one, but a lot of times there are a couple cosmetology schools in the area. All right.
There's not one for EG tax, so it can go up.
Nope, there's not one for EG tax. This is continuing education. We're registered with the IRS. We are not a eligible educational institution. Okay. So that's where we have that. Okay. But cosmetology schools, yes, a lot of people think, well, they're just learning to cut hair. A lot of these schools now have a portion, they're learning business classes. So that would qualify them for this credit. All right. And trust me, they know it and the school explains it to them. Because some of these schools, the cosmetology schools, I'm shocked how much money it costs to go to some of these.
They also learn it in.
Yeah. Yep. And anymore with what people do to their hair, they probably got chemistry classes too. So, because they got to learn how to make all those colors, right? Okay. Top of 625, it says no double dipping. All right. Basically, it's talking about do not do any of the following. So basically, that is the double dip section. Okay. All right. And if I remember right, Pat had a couple double dips on the education credits, if I remember right. Okay. Not to call you out, Pat. He's studying hard over there, isn't he? Okay. Expenses that don't qualify, insurance, medical expenses, okay? Had to help a girl the other night. University of Buffalo charges the incoming students for medical insurance. It's part of the ACA, okay? They have to then turn around and fill out a form, a waiver that says they have insurance so that it'll be credited back off their account. So there's $2,200 in their tuition bill when they start the semester that is for medical insurance. It's through Blue Cross Blue Shield. The University of Buffalo has this big policy through Blue Cross Blue Shield that each student gets a part of when they enroll. But if you have insurance through mom and dad, you can waive that and you get the $2,200 back. Okay. All right. So we have that. Talks about sports, games, hobbies, and non-credit courses. So those are there. Top of, so what do you think? My son's Frisbee and his golf balls and his racquetball. What do you think? Do I got qualified education expenses there?
Unless you can be a gym teacher.
Good point. Everybody hear what she said? Not unless he's going to teach gym, all right? And after 4.5 years and his 2 business degrees, if he teaches gym, I hope he's very happy doing it. So, okay.
So sometimes you have to take some of those classes just because they're part of what you're required to take for
your core curriculum. Yeah, your core curriculum. Yeah. So yeah, and most stuff is, but like I said, you know, you got to be careful. You can't get crazy on things. I can see a computer if it's required. Like I said, you know, an art student, brushes and stuff like that. My son, who's a business student, the racquetball, I don't know. So I'll have to work on that one with him. 626, again, great little flow chart. Okay, kind of has you ask those questions. All right. Okay, we got some exercises. So American Opportunity on the top of 629. Again, $2,500, okay, for each eligible student. So I am lucky enough in 2018, I have 2 college students. So lucky me. Finally, that shopping cart's been here for 4 days. Glad somebody finally came and got it. Both of them are undergraduate. However, what about my son who's in his 5th year? No, he'll probably be a lifetime learning for me. Okay? All right. Talks about the academic periods, that's with good. We got qualify. If you're unlucky enough that you have a student who withdraws, the taxpayer can claim an American Opportunity Credit for qualified education expenses not refunded when the student withdraws. And I have had those because somebody will actually claim the education expenses and then come to find out later they withdrew, and they get a nice little note from the IRS, and when we go to try to prove they're out of pocket, we find out that they withdrew. So all of a sudden, is that qualified education expenses, that money? No, only the portion that the school kept. All right. Let's see here. The refundable portion we'll talk about when we get into the forms. We have all that. Now, the 1098-T, my least favorite form that ever comes into the office. Okay. The reason is I am on, what page am I on? Top of
634.
Top of 634, okay? This is what you get from the schools. And they're finally, thank goodness, cracking down on the schools on this, all right? Box 1 and box 2. What's box 1 say? Payments received for qualified tuition and related expenses. What's box 2 say? Amount billed. Yeah, okay? The schools love to put it all in box 2. We billed the student at Canisius $50,000. Okay? What happens if they didn't pay all $50,000 in the tax year? Would we know it? No. All right, we have no idea. All right, so the schools are really incorrect. They should be putting it up here. Okay? They're pretty good about the scholarships and grants, where we talked about in the one problem, we'd have to subtract that out. But the schools, most all of them are notorious. They just throw that amount billed in there. Oh, we billed them $30,000. Okay, great. How much did they pay? And I have to ask the parents or the student. What's that? Yeah, you can see how it could get a little bit. So for a lot of mine, you know, I tell them these are great. Just come in with the whole statement of student account. It shows a little thing where it goes tuition, fees, lab fees, tech, you know, all the things. And then it gets down there and says, dad's Visa card, you know, student loans, you know, whatever it may be. I see the payments and they're dated. So I know what was actually paid. Okay. And again, you know, some of the amounts, that box 2, I got a number in there. I have no idea what makes it up or if it was paid for. Okay. So that's a great way to do that. All right. All right. We have a bunch of good fun exercises calculating all the credits and such. All right. On page 640, we have the lifetime learning credit. You're going to think somebody just sat here and copy and pasted. I bet when you read it, you're going, wait a second, didn't I just read that? Okay. All right. And Janet was reading it. Did Janet fall asleep when you were reading the second time? No? Okay. All the things are pretty much the same, but we're talking about a credit that is non-refundable. $2,000. That's the limit. Okay, so you can get no more than this. And you might get less. Why? Because it's non-refundable. If I only have a $1,500 tax bill, I'm only going to get $1,500. Okay, because it's a non-refundable credit. We talk about our qualified education expenses. Okay, so all those things, it goes through the things we talked about in that table. Like I said, that table in that first section is great. All right. This is the second chance, I guess, for all the drug dealers out there because they don't have to worry about their felony drug convictions. They can go back to school.
Rehab programs at a prison.
What's that?
So the rehab programs at a prison qualify for the colleges.
Rehab right out of prison? Yep, yep. Okay. 1098-Ts we can have on there. Again, to talk about that. They're going to report it there. All right. And the big thing with the 1098-T is if you look at the top of 644, the page, there's a 1098-T. What happened in box 9 there? graduate student. So you always got to check that box. Okay? So we always have to check that box. And we'll see how the calculation works on all these. You got a few problems in there. Lucky enough, like I said, it shows you filling them out, but oddly enough, when you start to try to follow them, best to start with part 3, then go back to part 1 and part 2.
So
Okay.
essentially, when they bring you this 1098T and the graduate student, you just say, I'm sorry, this isn't.
Nope, you go right to the lifetime learning credit. Because they can be a graduate student. Yep, you go right to it. Okay? Yep, you go right to it. All right. So that is chapter 6 in a nutshell. There's a lot of content in there, a lot of fluff, a lot of tests. But like I said, that table at the beginning of the chapter is perfect. All right. We talked about the foreign tax credit, but distinguishing, you know, first 4 years, refundable, the restrictions, childcare. But just know these credits, and you have to get people say, I paid $10,000 for childcare. What do you mean I only get $343? Well, it rolls back to $3,000, then it could roll back to 20% of that, and then depending on your tax bill, you know, and that's where sometimes with lower income individuals, if they don't have a tax bill, they don't get anything for it. Yeah, why would they get a refundable credit if they have no tax bill? Okay. And your next question might be, well, how are you affording this child care? And that's where the discussion comes out. Well, the state's reimbursing me. Well, then we can't. That's not earned income. You're not getting, you know, they're paying the bill. You're not paying the bill. Okay. All right. All right. So let's take 5 minutes. What I want you to do too, you can get coffee, use the restroom. But what I want you to do is I would like you to go to problem. Let's see here. 6-1. Okay. In the workbook 6-1. All right. And I want you to go ahead and start putting the information in there for Nancy Reeder. All right. So we're going to do 6-1. Okay. Oops.
And remarried? No. Have to make
There
that.
we go. All right. So we have, are you wondering about Samuel?
Yeah.
Okay. Could be a child from, you know, we don't have to ask too many personal questions, but
But it's the youngest,
it would be, yes. So it could be,
another man, since she had.
yep. So she's single. She might have, yeah, met somebody else and has a child, and that has his last name.
Are we allowed
Sammy
to
does.
ask all those questions or not?
What's that?
Are we allowed to
Well, again,
ask?
like I,
Make sure that it's really.
yeah, like I talked about, when we have things where maybe, you know, earned income credits on the table or child tax credit or something like that, what's one of the things? Relationship. So if I see Reeder and I see Jones, what's my first question going to be? Is this your child biologically? And usually the person across from me, that if I'm asking mom, she'll laugh and say, oh yeah, I was there for the birth, so yes, it's mine. Okay. All right. So we have that. We get them all in there. Remember what I told you, check the EIC no matter what. Okay. So on that main info sheet under the dependents and non-dependents, check EIC. It's not going to hurt you e-filing. It's not going to hurt diagnostics, but you would hate to leave that credit on the table if it wasn't there. So.
How about if you check the pending care? Does that hurt you or?
Did it just, hold on. Did it just stop?
My name code got pulled into yours on the W-2. And it won't go away. It just says PIZZ. Yeah.
Let's see if it's on here. Hold on, I gotta see if I can find it.
Dash.
Oh,
No, you don't.
They try. Oh, it takes one. I would rather not have to. You
Hmm.
know,
Did you get a 0 on the 4 kids? 3 kids? Is that what you're asking?
I don't even know what's happening here. I just did my W-2.
Oh,
Wait, I have to do the.
Hold on one second
step
here.
form for the child dependent, the 8812 or something.
the 2441?
Oh, yes.
Oh, boy. Okay, so something didn't all the way come down. Shoot.
You have to go in order. Let's see.
Darn it. Let's see here. Right. And all the way come down and stop for some reason. Hold on one second. We gotta get rid of that guy.
Try it again.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it stopped there.
Yeah, that's all of a sudden.
Okay, my screen might have timed out on this end. Okay, well, let it try going again, okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we got everybody in there, got the W-2 in there. All right. So we're down there, okay?
Does it verbally automatically check to the pending care and the years?
Yes, especially if you do all 3 kids.
Okay.
All right, in this
Do you want us to
case,
do the whole return or just the beginning return?
well, just do the main info, did the W-2. Now, on the main info sheet, what I want you to do next, Kevin was just asking about that. On the bottom of 6-6, I have mother's helper. Okay, and that is a what? Childcare. Okay, so go back to the main info sheet, and right there in the middle where we put George, Mary, and Samuel in, as Kevin said, we look at that, we have in care of Samuel and Mary. So in the column that says DC, we're going to check the last two, because Mary and Samuel are the ones that are in childcare. Apparently George is all right coming home and being on his own.
Oh, because they have this.
Yes, okay. So Kevin was asking if he checked all 3. You don't, because you're only going to check who you have. All right? Okay. Once we check those, what happens on your form tree on the left? Something happened. You saw the screen move over there on the left? Some out of the corner of your eye, you're going, whoops, something happened over there. 2441, the form we were talking about. Okay? So once we have that 2441 in there, all right, we go in there. What's our care provider? Okay. Actually, I just called them mothers, but
Mother's helper.
mother's helper, I guess I better put that all the way in there, right? Okay, so I got mother's helper on Main Street. Put the address in there. The little column C says you can check the box. We have an EIN number.
Put dashes in it then, or-
The EIN number? No, just put it straight in. What's that?
The code comes up as MOTH.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
It's just that that's a self-generated code, okay? All right. Okay, so we have that. All right. I was going to show you in here, if I type in the letter tax exempt, okay? Oddly enough, it fits perfectly in there, okay? So if it was a church that did not have a tax ID number, because they're tax exempt, we could do that. All right. This one too, if I'm in here and I type C, page 2, okay? So if I do that, whoops. See page 2? All right. What that does is it allows me to go to the bottom of the 2104, or excuse me, 2441, and I can put on the bottom of page 2 a little description.
But you're overriding the EIN number?
Well, this is if I have the lady next door and she doesn't want to give me her social security number because she's worried about identity theft. I'm going to put in my explanation, a little old lady next door that I pay to watch my kids won't give me her social security number because she's worried about her identity. Okay?
Is that a scratch pad then,
Kinda.
or you had to hit scratch?
No. What I did is I said, see page 2,
Where are we?
see page 2, and then I go to the 2441 page 2, and go all the way to the bottom of that page 2. Okay?
Could we write something in there without doing that page 2 thing?
No.
See page 2? So I can't physically write it in there because I do in my lines.
You do, but in order to refer to it, you'd have to not have an EIN number, not have a social security number.
Oh.
Okay, so that's why we see the C page 2. All right? Because if I put in,
Do page 2 before page 1 or something?
nope. All right, so I put that in there. If I don't write C page 2, okay, what is not read over here? All right, okay. All right. Okay. All right, so we have that.
So we do our qualified expenses as a 1,200 and the 500?
We put the 1,700 right up there. And then, whoops, I'm on our page, sorry. Okay, so we put that in there.
500.
And the 500 and the 1,200, yep. So we got 1,700. She had no dependent care benefits. So we can see her income. We see the calculation, all right? So we see everything going down there. Now, what's the one thing that I noticed right here? If you look at line 10, what's that number there?
2884.
2884. What is that number again? Yep, so if you go to the 1040 page 2 and look at line 44, so if you go to your 1040 page 2 and look at line 44, you see what? Her tax is 2884. So that's showing us that she could take up to $2,884 on that credit. But if we go back to the 2441 page 1, and we see all the calculations, what's her maximum credit? Because of her income, 20% of 1,700, which is what? $340. All right? So what's really for her, the maximum credit she could get with her income being $49,000 in their household? Well, but what's the maximum?
Oh, 2884.
Well, not as much that, because she can claim up to how much? 3,000 or 6,000, right? So with the kids, 6,000, but her income of that 6,000, she can only get credit on 20%. So what would be her maximum credit for somebody like her in a household? $1,200, right? So even if she paid 10,000, it's knocked down to 6,000, and that down again by 20% to $1,200.
However, if her tax was only 1,100, then it would only
It's
be
even,
100.
yep, it's even reduced more. So that's why I say, you know, people that have this credit, they think they're getting a dollar for dollar credit for all their daycare, okay? And that's not the case.
If you could do something else to make an adjustment to her income, to give her more.
An adjustment to her income as far as lowering her income,
Yeah, like IRA deduction or something before.
but we're kind of chasing our tail, because if I do an adjustment to income, what do? I lower her income, I lower her tax bill, and this is a non-refundable credit. So then I may reduce the credit even farther. Because you know what I mean, if I don't need it.
Yeah, if you don't need it.
Yeah, yep. So yeah, you know, it's one of those ones, like I said, non-refundable credits are kind of odd because they stop at some point. Okay, you don't get to keep them and keep going on forever. Okay. All right, so we have that. Now, I want you to try something. Okay, so we have this problem pretty much done. What's everybody have for their numbers?
3710,
Yep, and what's it on the state side?
834.
Yep. Yep, so those are the right answers, okay? Now, we're gonna do a little what if. All right?
3710 and 834.
Yep, yep. Is that what you got?
No,
We're looking.
What'd you have?
I never get the state.
What's your state number show up as?
2,000 extra.
They owe?
No, refund.
2,000 extra?
My refund is 2834.
Okay. Let's see. Go to your New York 201 page 1, or excuse me, page 2. Okay. And let's kind of see, let's go line by line, usually starting on the actual form itself. What do you have on line 19?
49,200.
Yep, okay. What do we have on? Okay, what do we have on, let's see, line 35?
38,000.
And line 37?
3,000.
37, the very bottom, taxable.
Oh, 35,000.
Okay. Let's go up. What's your tax bill on line 46? So go to New York 201, page 3.
Line what?
New York 201, page 3.
What pages?
Yep, so page 3.
Yeah, what line?
46, I'm sorry.
1750.
Okay. And let's go to the page 4. Okay. What's 63 show?
990.
What's 64 show?
340.
And what does 72 show?
3254.
Oh, okay. So her withholding was how much? State withholding?
Did you do head of household?
So go to the W-2 and look at your state withholding. It should be on the W-2 on page 66, her state withholding was only 1,254.
Oh,
Okay, that's where you added your extra 2,000. You entered, and it's kind of a dirty trick, whoever wrote the workbook, you entered the 3,254 off the federal withholding. So the state withholding was less than that. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, what I want you to do is everybody got 3710 and 834? Okay. So go up to File. So up in the top left under the green thing and bring down the menu. We're going to do a what if. Okay. So I'm going to go up there. I'm going to hit what if. And what's it turn? It turns green around the outside, correct? Okay.
What form do you want us to be in?
Well, everybody got it looking like that with the green?
Yep.
Okay. I want you to go to Pizza on the Corner. I want you to go to her W-2. All right. And in the Pizza on the Corner, her W-2, on box 10, I want you to put in $500. She got $500 from her boss at the pizza place on the corner to be able to do childcare. All right? Okay.
Wait a minute. Sorry. Going on what page now?
You're on the W-2 for Pizza on the Corner.
Okay, W2, and the what if is under the.
Boy, did you do what if first?
No,
Yep. Go up to the file.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Go click on that and go down. You'll see what if. Okay. So that it turns it green like that.
Yeah.
All right, and then box 10, put $500 in there. Okay. Now what I want you to do is I want you to go over to the 2441, page 1. Okay? What does that $500 do in part 2? Part 2, see part 2?
By 100.
Yeah, adjusted the refund down after it was all said and done, right?
Where did it go? Because
The 500?
it's not dollar for dollar. It's based
Yeah.
on what the 20
If you go to the 2441, page 2, and look at part 3,
I see.
there's a little calculation there. Okay?
And that's because 500 was paid by the state.
Well, 500 was actually something paid by her employer. It was a benefit from her employer. So somebody else was paying $500, not her.
I see.
Okay?
So it was in line 12.
Yes.
500.
Yep. If you look at line 13 and 14, that's where I was talking about some things where, you know, enter the amount forfeited or carried forward to 2018. I might have got $1,000, you know, Geico gives me $2,000 for my kids. I don't want to use it this year. I'm going to carry it forward to next year. Okay, that's fine. You might forgo whatever it may be. Okay, but if you carry it forward and you don't have dependent care, chances are what's going to happen?
Until you lose it, right?
You lose it and it becomes taxable income.
If you lose it.
Well, where did it go? So, all right. So, you know, that's where that things, and sometimes you'll see those, but not often, not very often at all. Okay. All right. So we have that on that part. All right. So I want you to go back.
It changes our refunds too.
Yep. Change your refunds. Now go back up to file, go down to your what if and click on it again. And then it gets a little box that says confirm this. We're going to say no.
We don't want to change it.
Yep. So everything kind of flashes and it goes back to what it was originally.
All those
Okay.
flashes.
Think the computer's going to shut down? So, okay. All right. Okay. So that's one with childcare on it. We kind of did one with the education. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to have you do a little interview. So let's see. You two in the back want to pair up? Who's going to be the tax preparer? Do I have to flip a coin?
Well, yeah, I'll be.
You're going to be the tax preparer, Janet? Okay. All right. And since Kevin's had experience doing this, we're going to make Mary Ann be the first one. So,
First one, what? Tax preparer?
mhm.